Hey, welcome to another GG WoW video. Me, Dratnos, and Tettles here with the players from the two teams that had Golden Guardians members in them. Of course, Incarnation. We've got Growl and Dorki representing, and we also have JPC and Onezy, the two Golden Guardians members from Team Echo Guardians in the Great Push #2. We're going to talk with them about their experiences, feedback for the format, all that kind of stuff. So tell us, why don't you go ahead and lob the first question here?
All right, so let's talk about preparation. So time trials were streamed by both of you guys, and there was a lot of interesting stuff to actually be going through. So, but the first thing that I would like to ask is how did the preparation compare to that of the MDI? Because you guys just came off a pretty long MDI season. Was it any different to prep for the Great Push, or was it very similar from the MDI?
So prep is usually in 2 stages for the MDI. The first half is just playing a little bit together, getting used to your team, just doing anything, just playing together and getting some synergy down. And then stage 2 is kind of okay, here are the affixes, this is what we need to do, let's practice this one route. And MDI had both of those stages, and Great Push only has the first part. And the first part is, I think, a lot less productive. It's really hard to know exactly how to do a 29 key or a 30 key unless you know exactly what the affixes are to kind of plan around. So the practice was definitely different in the sense that it was way more general and way more just you kind of just play together and do some keys and just see how things go and how people feel. And you can hammer out some things that oh, how do we deal with this really hard boss or something like that. But for the most part, it's a lot more general and a lot less specific.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, right? The regular MDI format is just so different from what you do on the live servers, right? How much closer was the Great Push experience, practicing for that to what you would be doing if there wasn't esports, right? And you were just pushing keys?
I think it's hard. I think pushing keys is just more about the consistency element of it, and just playing a lot, playing together, giving yourself the opportunity to get those big keys and then nail them. Because you never know, are you even gonna get the big key that you need, the big world first, whatever? If you get it, is everything gonna go well? So it's more of a volume game for playing on live, whereas Great Push, it's sort of your time slot is so limited, you only have these certain hours, and it's less about, oh, will you get these keys and any of the random parts and the consistency, and more about just being able to time, here's your one shot. I guess consistency is more important, but the the longevity of it and hammering it out becomes less valuable, because it doesn't really matter in the Great Push if you could have done a 30 DOS over the course of a week, because you only had basically 1 or 2 shots from each of these teams if they even wanted to go for something like that.
So you talked about consistency, and obviously synergy plays a pretty big role into that. Both of your teams had one new player. Okay, so in Incarnation's case, you guys had one new player in Anarchy. In the Echo Guardians case, it's a completely new team. How did the merging of the two teams really feel synergistically? How much different was that for you guys?
Yeah, it was kind of just a little bit of a relearning process, in the sense where you're tackling all the dungeons that we did with Ambition, but since we're playing with 3 different people, the roles kind of switch a little bit in terms of what everyone's assigned to, and the coordination in that sense. So it was definitely quite the learning process during practice, and I think that definitely made a big difference heading into the tournament.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the format itself. One thing that this format brought in that the first Great Push didn't have was eliminations at the end of day 1 and day 2. Now, both of your teams survived both of those eliminations, but
narrowly,
it was kind of close on a few of them, right? So how did you feel, JPC, how did you feel about the specter of elimination hanging over your head?
On one hand, it was a good motivator, and it made sure that you were engaged and that the first day counted. But I don't know if 1 team per day is the best way to go about it, because the Great Push, in a sense, is supposed to be just pushing up high keys, right? Doing keys that are very impressive. And the entire first day of the competition is just keys that are not impressive. And it's just part of the competition to have to push them from 25 to 27, but it's not necessarily indicative of your max potential as a team, I guess. So I think it would have been better if teams were eliminated at the end of day 2, but maybe more than one team, because by the end of day 2 you had teams doing like 29 DOS and 29 halls, and you were starting to get into the realm of like actual real keys. And so I don't know, just to be, if you looked at it, right, the team that was eliminated on day 1 was effectively tied with like 3 other teams. They just had barely worse timer. And I don't know if like having a worse timer in a 26 or 27 merits like being kicked out. But I think it was engaging, I guess. Like it was a lot of pressure, and it was kind of fun in that sense. So
I think
Yeah,
the keys
definitely.
maybe started a little bit too low. I think
Yeah.
that was the main problem with it, was
Yeah.
that if day 1 would have like, the problem was in day 2 and day 3 there were these exciting moments where like, you know, teams are really with these challenging keys, and it's like, you know, oh no, like can they kill this boss? Like that's what high keys I think are about, or like not even like going into a pull or a boss not even knowing if your team can beat it. Like that's the, you know, in MDI, you know, you practice it, you've done this before, but in Great Push it's like you're doing a key that's so high you don't even know if you can do it. And the day 1, while it was probably better for the viewer's experience, I think the big problem was just the key level. Like this Great Push started at 25, and a lot of the keys were being done at 29 and 30 levels. So the day 1 was basically only just what we call homework keys and just pushing stuff up. And so like JPC said, it's like, well, like the team that got eliminated because they like didn't two chest a key earlier, you know, and which is like, is that really what pushing is about? I mean, maybe. I appreciate the like experimenting with formats and trying stuff, but I do agree it missed the mark a little bit with like what the Great Push final should be, of like being super high keys.
What would you change then about like? Is it just like a thing where the number was wrong? Do you think it should have just started at 27, or do you think that there is like a format differentiator that you would have made?
Well, the one thing I had thought a lot about was, if you do this thing where you just blanket start every single key at the same key level, you're going to have a problem, because the keys are not like the same effective difficulty across key levels. Like a 29 Necrotic Wake is way easier than a 29 Eye of Ashara, right? And so it's like, in one sense, they need more maybe consulting from the players on like, oh, you know, if you do Necrotic Wake, it should start at 29. If you do DOS, it should start at 27. If you do Theater, it should start at 26 or something like that. But then at the same time, it's not really like an elegant solution to be like, we're just like randomly throwing up where the keys start at. But that's kind of like how it would have to be to make that make sense with the eliminations on day 1. Otherwise, you could have it all keep starting like way below the final potential key level. But maybe if you eliminated more teams, no teams on day 1, and you eliminated 2 or 3 teams on day 2, so that the final day was only 3 teams or 4, I think maybe it would be a little better. I'm not entirely sure, though.
They could have done less dungeons on the first day too. Like if there was only 2 or 3 dungeons, it would have given teams more opportunity to be like, you know, the end of day 1 will be, okay, who pushes these 3 dungeons to their limits, not who pushes these 4 dungeons to like, you know, all 27s basically.
They could have released 2 dungeons on the second day and then 1 dungeon on the last day. They could have done that too.
So you think a 3-2-1 format is a little bit better than 4-1-1?
Probably, because you would get time to actually get to the highest key level in some of the keys on day 1 if you didn't have to worry about doing the extra dungeon 2 or 3 times.
How about the specific dungeons that we saw? You know, of course, one thing to talk about, I think one of the first things we should talk about with specific dungeons as well, is the Legion dungeons. But beyond that, the Saturday and the Sunday, you know, the fact that the Necrotic Wake was the Sunday dungeon, that's been another point of discussion recently about the whole thing. So how did you guys feel about those choices?
I'd say for us specifically, it was pretty bad, having Necrotic Wake specifically, just because we had a chance of potentially coming back if the other teams had to fight it out between doing, you know, like pushing up to a 28 feeder and then having to grind out these hard 29 keys or 30 keys. But we didn't have that opportunity to really catch up. I mean, part of it is because we fucked up, right? Because like we didn't play so well in the first 2 days. But I think the bigger issue was just it being necrotic wake and having to get this 32 key where you have to like literally 2 chests or even 3 chests all the way up there.
Yeah, it was kind of like what JPC said, right? Like each key has different difficulties. So if the last day was a really difficult key, then okay, well, just doing like 3 of the dungeons, getting to a 28 would have been pretty good. But because it was not a difficult key, you had to go from a 25 all the way to like a 32 essentially to win the tournament. And that, for a team like Aster, because they were in such a good spot, that took up most of their day. And then they just kind of went to court, and they had that really cool court run too. But yeah, so that one was a little bit unfortunate to us. I mean, I think the Legion dungeons were cool. Again, I think I welcome the format changes and trying stuff. Like I hope this is a way for them to bring in like, more dungeons and more variety. I think that's what we're lacking right now in Mythic Plus. So it was not good for me specifically because I've never set foot into any of these dungeons, and because the Great Push practice is hard and we didn't even have access to the dungeons until the week before, like, man, I can't even really be upset at myself for not playing great, but let's say, I stepped in some lightnings, we ate some snail frontals. There were some things that happened that, you don't expect to happen in the tournament finals. We sanguine healed some mobs. There was some stuff that happened. I think one of the depletes that we had, I died 3 times to Hate Coil, and like 2 of the times I don't even know how I died. I'm just like, I don't even know the mechanic I just died to. They're like trying to explain to me that like if you're on the land, you can't see the lightning on these certain phases, and we're just like in the tournament finals, and I'm just like, oh no.
So JPC, just circling it back a little bit, you said before day 3 started, if it was Necrotic Wake, you guys are just basically eliminated on the spot. Why did you feel that way? I know Growl touched on it a little bit, but can you expand a little bit further on it?
Well, we just mapped out like the keys that we still had to do, which were not hard keys, like we knew we could do them, were 28 spires, 28 and then 29 Court of Stars, and we weren't sure if we were gonna have to go back into Halls of Atonement to get a better time because we didn't have a very good time in 29. But basically, if you just look at the spires and then the 2 courts, we already had like an hour and 40 minutes of the day gone if we played perfect in those 3 dungeons. And then you have to take a 15-minute break. So basically 2 hours of the day are gone. So you have 3 hours to go from 25 wake to 32 wake. And we didn't even practice 31 wake. We did a 30 wake one time in practice, had like 20 deaths, timed it with like 10 minutes left. And we're like, all right, whatever. And we're moving on. And so we knew that if you go 21 to 27, 27 to 29, that's another hour. So now you only have 2 hours left. 29 to 30, 30 to 31. Now you have 1 hour left. So basically, we just figured like, okay, we would have had to play perfectly all day long in a dungeon that we didn't practice. It was just like really slim chances, kind of. But on the other hand, if it would have been Theater of Pain, that would have been free because you would go 25 to 27 theater, then you do your 27, and so an hour would have gone by, and then you do 28, and then boom, you're like pretty much done for the day in like an hour and a half.
Court or whatever.
Yeah, and you have like all day long to do whatever. Oh, and we had to do Eye of Ashara too, actually. On top of the spires and the courts, we had to start the day with that. Yeah. So, yeah.
And this was a team's perspective, like that was like basically tied for second. Like, let's say like if you were like in Incarn's place, like you might as well already been knocked out on Saturday because of like how perfect you would have to play on Sunday just to even have a chance of like tying or something. Like,
yeah, that was exactly our math when we went into day 2 or day 3. Like we knew we essentially mathed it out, and we literally needed to time 8 keys in a row.
That's what I'm saying. Like you might as well have already been knocked out on Saturday. Like there's like no chance for you if it's Necrotic Wake. Like it's just the fact that they put it on Sunday was ridiculous.
On one hand, it's like it's bummer for us, but on the other hand, like it is what it is. Like it's one of the dungeons.
Oh yeah, it is what it is.
And also, I think I wasn't sure. There were a lot of theories, but I think putting Necrotic Wake in the Great Push at some point was a good idea because it's a key that goes up very high. And I think if they people love that high key number level or whatever, and if they put putting a fortified Necrotic Wake with easy affixes in the finals, that's gonna be like a world first key, right? I think that's I kind of saw it coming, you know, there's only so much you can do about it, but you kind of saw that coming, that they were going to want to do, you know, because, Aster, like, wins the Great Push with, like, a 29 court and a 32 wake, and it's, like, you know, it's cool stuff to talk about, and it was really cool to watch it happen. So while it's, like, a bummer for us, I understand why they did it, and I don't even want to say that I think it's a bad thing.
Like, in terms of content,
Yeah.
I think it's great to have Necrotic Wake in the
Yeah.
Great Push, just because, you know, people want to see the big numbers. But in terms of time consumption on the Championship Sunday, like, it's just like the timing of it was just very unfortunate for all the teams that were like, you know, like 3rd and 4th or whatever.
Yeah, well, like JPC said too, right? What if they started it at 29?
Right.
If they started at 29, then it's completely different. Then they have kind of the best of both worlds. I understand why that adds more complications, because, like, already even there was, like, the Legion dungeon started at 23 and the other ones started at 25. And I remember, like, the start of day 3, we do our Necrotic Wake and it's on a 23. And I'm just like, eventually I realize it, like, in the second pull, and I'm like, yo, this is a 23. And my team's just like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, it's a 23. And I'm like, it starts at 25. And then we're like, wait, you know, like, there's still already a little bit of confusion with, like, different keys. So I think that's probably why they didn't do something like that, but it still might be the answer, is to have, like, certain keys start at certain levels. It's hard though, right? Like, it can't be perfect. Like, they can't have it, you know, every single key be exactly, like, 3 pushable levels and math at everything out. Like, that's sort of the element of Great Pushes, that you never know exactly what's going to happen, and there, you know, things can be very different. I mean, that's, like, part of the live key aspect too, I guess.
How did you guys end up feeling about the Legion dungeons by design? Obviously, I feel like they're fairly different just as a whole from the Shadowlands dungeons. The timer is a lot less restrictive, but it promotes things like being able to live Wrath of Ashara, Advisor Melandris kind of boss stuff and not get one shot. How did that end up feeling relative to, like, what we've been playing in Shadowlands dungeons?
As a healer, I like that. I like the element of, okay, we need to live this boss. Like, Court of Stars being, like, feeling like I have a very high impact on whether or not we time the key or deplete the key is, like, cool. Rather, like, having a test of your healing ability is cool. I think it probably, I don't know, for DPS players, they just want to pull a bunch of crabs, so they don't really care about any of that other stuff. If you just put a bunch of crabs in the dungeon, they're happy. I think for the design, I really like the design of Eye of Ashara, the way that you can go to whatever boss you want, and there's a whole lot of trash to pull, and it's really open. I feel like that design aspect was lost a little bit in Shadowlands, and I hope that returns. I think Court of Stars is a interesting dungeon. I would say that one. I like the fact that there's 2 really hard bosses, but the rest of the dungeon is like, you know, not. Maybe it was because I didn't get to experience the different, like, oh, what buffs do we have and what profession stuff do we have, and, like, trying to, you know, improv on the fly, because we just had the set ones, and that's really all I know about Court of Stars. But yeah, I think I liked Eye of Ashara, the design. I think Court of Stars, I liked the last 2 bosses, and then didn't really like much else.
I don't remember the RNG of, like, did you get the Hunter Trap or not as a good thing. So I think that dungeon definitely had its problems as well. But I did like the aesthetic and the boss, like the nature of those last 2 boss fights, right? Where it's just like, how on earth are we going to kill these?
The one thing I wondered about Court was, like, what was the probability that every single like, class specific thing in Court happened to be the current, like, meta team comp? Like, what are the odds that the Brew is active for the Monk and the Rogue for the Poison and the Demon Hunter and the Mage for the damage increase and all that? You know what I mean? Like, it could have forced you to play, like, Warlock or something else, you know?
There were very specific combinations that you could get. You can only get, like, very specific combos. And it ended up being, like, where the meta was, I was like a blacksmith balance druid, because blacksmith could also activate the trap. You guys didn't have the trap in the Great Push, but, like, there's this one trap that was, like, super OP, and you could kill 2 mini bosses with it instantly. That was the advantage of it, is that you could insta kill 2 mini bosses with it. And, like, you would have to have, like, a bunch of players with some super cooked professions just to be able to do it. So Dorki, as somebody who played both expansions, like Legion and now the Time Walking, did you have any thoughts on it?
It was really nice to see Legion again. It was, like, not exactly how I remembered it. I don't know if it's because of tuning or what, but I swear it feels like some stuff just does 0 damage. Other things do infinite damage, like the Hydras, for example. The Hydras and I, for the hell reason, they're, like, literally untankable. And then you have, like, almost every single mob in Court that does negative amounts of damage where it just feels like I could just be AFK. But also, it feels like the health of certain mobs are also really off. It's kind of weird, but it was really nice to play some Legion dungeons again. I mean, those dungeons specifically were not that fun. I feel like Cord and I were kind of lame. But I could imagine them adding like Nefarian's Lair or Halls of Valor. Those would have been crazy.
Dude, you cannot put people in Halls of Valor.
That would have been crazy for Great Push.
Yeah, you have to just push it 3 key levels, and that's your whole day.
45-minute dungeon, by the way.
How did you guys feel about the Infernal Affix as well? That one's one that, you know, that this is the first time it's being used in any kind of competitive thing. I mean, obviously Incarnation, you guys came up with some crazy resets of the Infernal Affix and Quarter Stars, but also just like using it to help make the bosses easier. How'd that land for you?
It was cool. The Affix grew on me. Part of the reason the Affix grew on me is because it was like really overtuned at the very start during practice. And we started, and I'm like, dude, what is this? And I literally, the way I was playing it was I was just dropping Ashen on every single one, and I had no idea how to heal it otherwise. And then eventually they fixed the bug, and it became much better. It took a while for us to understand exactly how it works. For a lot of people who don't know, you kill the Infernals drop a circle that you pick up, and then once you pick up that circle, it pulses damage around you, and it also stacks up an aura on each pulse that increases the damage mobs take. So basically you kill the Infernals. As soon as you kill them, you want to be in something, or maybe even already have those mobs pulled, and then you're pulsing that extra damage, and then once it's sort of stacking up, you drop your cooldowns. And that's why you saw for instance, some of the teams killed the second boss in Quarter Stars a lot faster than we did, because we were using a strategy that we were avoiding that Infernal, but they were actually using the Infernals to kill the boss, and we're like, huh, that's actually probably smart. You know, we should use that. So yeah, I think it grew on us a little bit. I think it's similar to Tormented in a way that when it comes out, it seems really cool, but then eventually it gets to the point, like pretty quickly, where you just know what to do and there's not much play around it. So I think maybe it's something like, I don't know if it's quite a seasonal Affix level, but for this like sort of event and this like time walking thing, it was like perfect. It was absolutely perfect. I really liked it.
I'd say for a seasonal, it's definitely not great, because it can get boring really quick and it doesn't really add too much. Like, I think what makes a great Affix is something like Awaken, where you just have so many different ways you can play it and so many different routes, and you know, you always constantly think about how you can put this Affix to use. But like these new Affixes, it's like, all right, well, we gotta come and kill this thing, and then, you know, you're just continuing as you usually do.
All right, so next question is, in a hypothetical world where you compete in the next MDI, would you want this format to be involved more in that? Or did you like doing the MDI like you did for the both of you, you know, for the first time in the last season, the kind of standard speedrunning format?
I don't know. I definitely just like the format of the Great Push more, just because it's just like way more adrenaline. I feel like, I don't know, like just the fact that like everyone's competing against each other and you basically just have to put up your best times. It's just something like I really enjoy a lot, instead of just like you only get one chance to play perfect.
They're both different. It's hard to say. I think one thing about Great Push, while it's true that you get multiple chances, it is so taxing. Like, to just have to play, like, Great Push is essentially like if you're playing MDI, except you have to play all your matches back to back to back. Like, just because it's maybe not the end of the world if you don't deplete, like, yeah, you can say that, but like, also we both lost. You know, like, Aster played out of their minds for 15 hours straight, or like, you know, 3 5-hour sessions, and they won, you know, so.
Yeah, actually, so how was it for you guys in Echo Guardians? Were you guys getting burnt the fuck out doing the keys for like 5 hours straight?
I was burnt out before I even signed up for the Great Push.
Actually true. For me, I mean, I just like love doing it, so I wasn't really burnt out or anything. The only thing I would say is like, obviously, you know, we didn't practice for Great Push nearly as much as we probably should have, but definitely not as much as MDI. So like a lot of the issues I think that we had would have just been handled by practicing a regular amount, but it is what it is.
I think all the teams had that similar thing where, like, all the teams with players who played in the MDI, like, we put a lot of time into the game, and we're all really not ready to go back to like a super full practice schedule. And so I think all of us for Great Push kind of took it easy in a way, which I think is like fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that inherently. I'm not saying there's anything bad about that. Like having, I mean, if anything, I think it's awesome. The fact that there's like a main tournament and there's like a smaller tournament, you know, off to the side that like gives us something to do while we wait for the next patch.
Did it at least feel like okay though that you guys were able to stream this kind of stuff? Because during MDI, it's like super serious, and none of you guys ended up streaming. But at least with this, a lot of the practice ended up being
people are
streamed.
streaming this.
Dorki Bear Z was streaming, I heard.
Oh no.
Yeah, I tried to see if DB VOD was playing, but apparently he's not in this tournament.
What about Banana Land?
Goddamn Banana Land, man.
Banana Land, man.
No suffering _81 either, is what he said.
I can't believe they're gonna talk smack to us about it now. Holy moly.
They knew?
It's only
They
one
knew
speed.
about the bot?
I'm sorry.
Remember that triple short pull?
You know,
Yeah, you know,
what's the funniest-
look, we gotta save this for another GG.
I'll
video,
remember.
right?
Just
You know
This
what's the
this is
funniest
content
part
for
about
another
this?
GG.
Just look up my
video.
Warlock's name.
The
That's all I gotta
funniest
say.
part about this is that we learned about this from the player that doesn't talk, from Junkrat.
What do you mean?
That's the most ironic part about it.
Wow, the secret's finally out.
No, he didn't tell us, but he was the one that typed in chat at some point one of your guys' stream things. And like the chat bubble like popped up or something.
Wait, what?
What? Hold on. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Okay,
it was a
Nerf-
chat bubble leak, and the rest is history.
Then Nerf was like, "Wait, did you see that?" And then that's how we figured it out. And I was like,
All right.
"What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Junkrat just typed it." And yeah. But that's a story for another time.
What a lore
Yeah,
section with the bell.
that does. If you want the GG Incarn versus Ambition rivalry war video, leave a comment because there's a whole story behind that one.
All right. We do have one final question to get to, but before we ask that one, does anyone have anything that they wanted to add to this conversation that we didn't ask the right question to get?
The one thing I'll say about the Great Push that I think I like way more than MDI is I think it's like universally understandable, like what is impressive and like what is some feat of gaming. Like in MDI, you play and it's like, okay, they did a 13-minute tyrannical 21 these affixes. It's like, is that fast? Is that slow? I don't know. The players don't even know. Is it like, yeah, one team won, but like, is it actually good? Who has any idea? And it's like, okay, now you got the same miss, but it's a different key level, and now it's fortified and different. It's like, it's impossible to like have any appreciation for if it's good or not. But then in the Great Push, like everyone, when they see that 32 necrotic wake, it's this shared like, holy shit, Aster did a 32 necrotic wake. Like, wow, that's crazy. And like everyone gets into it. And I just wish that there was more of that in MDI, I guess, because in MDI, like even a lot of the runs in the championships, like in Aster versus Echo, they were not fast runs. And so, but like when you look at Championship Sunday and Great Push, and you look at the keys that were done, they were like really, really incredible keys. So I don't know. I don't know what the solution is for that, but that's like one thing that has always kind of bugged me about it.
I'm kind of in the same boat, but like in the sense of like it's very easy to lose the viewer's interest in MDI if one team just completely scuffs their run.
Yeah, that too.
Like let's say like it's the first day of the cups or whatever, and like the number one seed is going against whoever. Like obviously like people expect the number one seed to win, but once you start seeing the other team wiping and stuff, it's like, okay, like I've like just completely lost interest. Like
Yeah, you just tab out, go wait for the next match.
Yeah, you just go like open up YouTube or something. So I think one thing that I don't like about MDI is just like the way it retains its viewerships. Like I feel like it's really hard to do it with their certain format.
I think it's hard overall, just because when you do difficult dungeons against the best teams in the world, there's very, very little room for error. And so,
Yeah, for sure.
because it's like not tech. Like, it's head-to-head, but it's not head-to-head. It's not like, oh, this team messed up, so the other team can now capitalize and win the match on it. It's more like, this team messed up, and now this team wins, but now we have to watch them, do their victory lap for 10 minutes, which
like if
it's hard to avoid in this format, I guess.
I do think one big advantage of MDI though is when it's actually a good game, it's much more interesting in my opinion than the Great Push. Like when we were watching Aster versus Echo in that Necrotic Wake, like, that was pretty sick. Or
Yeah,
like the
that was
time
really-
when we stomped Echo or not, when we stomped Echo 4-1. That was also pretty sick. But you don't really get that in the Great Push.
I'm surprised you like that one so much. Yeah, I can't see why that would be such a good memory.
Yeah, it was cool.
With that discussion out of the way, let's top it all off with a final question based on a tweet from our resident man, JPC. Is MDI greater than the Great Push, or is the Great Push greater than MDI? This is a yes or no question, no discussion. Let's just go down the list. Dorki, what do you think? MDI or Great
low
Push?
keys versus high keys. I think the higher one is cooler.
Okay, Growl.
This is hard. Probably still Great Push.
Okay, so we got 2 for Great Push so far. JPC, how about you?
Great Push.
All right, and finally we have Onezy. Is it going to be a 4-0 for Great Push, or do we have a MDI resistor?
I'm gonna say the Great Dungeon Invitational.
The Great Dungeon
Dude, don't be so
Invitational.
political, man. We can't
No,
affect the
great push, great
change.
push.
Yeah, there it is.
All right, we got 4 votes for Great Push.
It's
Although, of
unfair
course,
though. We're high key doers. We're
Yeah.
not MDIers.
that's true.
Well,
We
you
gotta
guys
ask someone like JB.
you guys did make the global finals for the MDI. You are MDI doers.
Yeah, you two are both what, top 4 teams in both Great Push and MDI.
Yeah, but that's because people suck. That's all.
Oh my goodness gracious. All right, with that, we will be out of here for this recording one. Hope everybody enjoyed the discussion, and let us know in the comments what you thought about the Great Push number 2. And also, what you'd like to see for the GG WoW Incarnation versus Ambition Grudge History
Lore session.
video. Thanks for watching.
Damn, Dorki.
That was, oh my fucking god, he murdered him.
Dude, imagine losing to some high keyers.
Yeah, imagine losing to us.